He had everything: wealth, power, and a wife slowly fading from illness. But instead of caring for her, he locked her in a barn like something disposable. Only one creature witnessed it all, and the horse did something no one ever expected. The morning sun bathed the estate in golden light, but the silence inside the Preston property was cold, heavy, and unnatural. Behind the grand Georgian mansion nestled in the Virginia hills, a wooden barn stood solitary among the meadows. Most believed it was abandoned. But inside, locked behind rusted iron bars and weather-beaten doors, lived a woman who had once been the heart of the household. Her name was Evelyn Preston, the beloved wife of Leonard Preston, an elite venture capitalist celebrated for his philanthropy and political ties. In the public eye, Leonard was a beacon of elegance and power, a man who donated millions to cancer research, attended black-tie galas beside senators, and graced magazine covers with quotes about love, duty, and legacy. But in private, Leonard was a man obsessed with appearances. And when Evelyn began to change, when her speech slurred, her body weakened, and the doctors mentioned the word neurodegenerative, he made a choice. She embarrasses herself. She embarrasses me, Leonard had told the family doctor in confidence. Evelyn had once been an acclaimed art history professor. Sharp, witty, radiant. But the illness, diagnosed as early-onset Parkinson's, came like a thief, stealing her motor functions, then her voice. Leonard couldn't bear the stares at dinner parties, the pitying smiles from guests who used to envy them. So he hid her. He told their staff she'd moved abroad for treatment. Told friends she was visiting her sister in Florence. In reality, he relocated her into the old barn once used for breeding Andalusians. He hired a nurse, a quiet, grim-faced woman named Janet, and gave strict instructions that no one, not even the groundskeepers, were to go near the barn. But one soul still lingered. One soul watched everything. A stallion named Bishop. Bishop had been Evelyn's horse for nearly 15 years, a majestic black Frisian with eyes that held wisdom, defiance, and memory. He stood just beyond the barn in a neighboring paddock, separated only by a thin line of rotting fence. Every day, he watched the nurse arrive. Every day, he heard the muffled cries. He smelled the antiseptic. He saw Evelyn's hands reach out through the small window, trembling. And Bishop remembered. He remembered Evelyn whispering to him through apple-scented mornings. Remembered the way she combed his mane and sang softly about light and oceans. He remembered Leonard, too, especially the anger. The yelling. The night he struck Evelyn in the stable when no one else was looking. It was Bishop who started the digging. He began pawing the earth near the corner of the barn where the foundation met the paddock. The stable boys thought it was just habit. But Bishop had seen something others missed, a gap, a weakness in the structure. Meanwhile, Evelyn's condition worsened. She could no longer stand without trembling. Her voice had reduced to whispers. Janet, the nurse, was not cruel, but she was apathetic, underpaid, overworked, and burdened with secrets she was afraid to question. She followed orders. Kept Evelyn alive, but never spoke more than necessary. She sedated Evelyn daily. Fed her through a straw. And always kept the door locked with a thick padlock only Leonard owned. And Leonard? He had already moved on. To Samantha Vale, a 29-year-old political strategist with sharp cheekbones and no past. To him, Evelyn was a closed chapter. A necessary inconvenience. He planned to file for legal separation on mental health grounds. Then he'd move Samantha into the estate. But Samantha was no fool. She had grown up poor, clawed her way to influence, and she had one rule: trust no man with secrets. Something about the way Leonard changed the subject when Evelyn came up, the way he bristled when she asked about the barn, it unsettled her. So she started snooping. And one night, while Leonard attended a black-tie gala in D.C., Samantha wandered the estate with a flashlight and a flask. That's when she saw Bishop, pacing, restless, pawing again at the same corner near the barn. And then, she heard it. A soft groan. A cry, human. Her breath caught. She followed the sound, heart pounding, until she reached the barn door. padlocked. Silent again. But Bishop neighed suddenly, rearing slightly and stomping. As if trying to say, "Look again." And Samantha, driven by instinct and adrenaline, shone the light into the side vents. And she saw her. A pale woman curled on a cot. Hair limp. Eyes wide open, staring at the wall. Barely moving. Samantha's hand flew to her mouth. That was the moment everything shifted. She didn't scream. Didn't confront Leonard. Not yet. She snapped photos. Took video. Captured Bishop's frantic behavior. She backed away silently, her mind racing. And at that exact moment, Leonard was on stage, shaking hands with a senator, giving a speech about ethics and American legacy. The irony didn't just reek, it bled. The next morning, Leonard returned, oblivious. But something had changed. Because that night, Janet didn't come to the barn. Instead, Bishop began to neigh louder, scratching harder, panicked. The barn smelled of blood. And Evelyn didn't respond when Samantha returned. She was lying still. Very still. Then, a blink. Samantha dropped to her knees. She was alive, but barely. And for the first time, Samantha realized, if she didn't act soon, Evelyn might not survive another night. But here came the first twist. Samantha drove to the sheriff's office that afternoon, only to be met with polite smiles and evasive eyes. The deputy knew Leonard. He was a donor. A friend. "I'm sure you're mistaken, Miss Vale. Evelyn Preston is in Europe for treatment." Samantha showed the photos. They smiled, nodded, and told her to leave them on file. She left, shaking. It was Bishop, again, who gave her the courage to try something different. That night, Samantha snuck into the barn and whispered to Evelyn, "I'm going to get you out." But Evelyn, through trembling lips, finally said something that made Samantha freeze. She whispered, "He didn't just lock me in here, he killed our son." The words echoed inside Samantha's mind like a dropped wine glass on marble. "He killed our son." She stumbled back in the dark, her knees hitting the barn floor. Evelyn's eyes were glossy, her face pale as the moonlight seeping through the vent. She wasn't delirious, Samantha could feel it. There was a truth trembling beneath that whisper. A truth buried and rotting for years. "What do you mean?" Samantha whispered, but Evelyn was already fading again, her breath shallow and rattling. She'd said too much. Her body couldn't support the weight of her own secrets. Samantha knew what had to be done. She couldn't trust the local sheriff. Couldn't trust Leonard's friends or their elite country club network. So she turned to the one thing Leonard underestimated, the internet. By sunrise, Samantha had uploaded encrypted footage of Evelyn, the locked barn, and even clips of Bishop's behavior to a private cloud. Then she contacted a friend, Tomas Rivera, an investigative journalist from her early career days. The kind who'd been banned from 5 corporate events for asking the wrong questions. The kind who never stopped digging. Tomas arrived the next night. He didn't say much. Just stared at the footage, his jaw tightening. "This is sick," he muttered. "And it's gonna get uglier." But while Samantha was busy planning with Tomas, Leonard grew suspicious. He noticed Samantha becoming distant. No longer interested in dinner dates or gala prep. Her questions returned, subtly at first, then bolder. And one morning, Leonard caught her near the paddock, speaking softly to Bishop. He watched from the window, his jaw twitching. That night, he checked her phone. And he saw the photos. The barn. Evelyn. Bishop. His fingers trembled as he closed the screen. He didn't explode. Leonard never did. He calculated. 2 nights later, Janet disappeared. Without a word. Her car gone. Her phone dead. Samantha's heart raced. "He's erasing evidence," Tomas said flatly. She might have been a risk. Samantha tried calling Janet, no answer. Her apartment was cleaned out. Mail stacked. It was as if she never existed. Leonard was tightening the noose. But he didn't know Bishop. Because Bishop escaped. No one knows how exactly. Perhaps the rotted fence finally gave way. Or perhaps the horse, desperate and driven by years of loyalty, found a way. But at dawn, a neighbor found a large black stallion galloping along the rural road toward town, covered in sweat and dirt. The neighbor was a retired vet. And she recognized Bishop. "I thought he was sold," she told the animal shelter worker. "He belonged to that art professor. Evelyn something." But she hadn't been seen in 2 years. That single remark was the spark. A local forum post about a loose horse tied to a missing woman began to gain attention. Then Tomas leaked a single image anonymously, Evelyn's face behind the barn slats. It exploded. Reddit threads. Twitter rage. Instagram reels. People comparing her to stories of captivity, gaslighting, and wealthy abuse of power. Hashtag Where is Evelyn trended for 2 straight days. Leonard panicked. He held a press conference claiming Evelyn had been living abroad, in seclusion, for deep medical healing. He showed forged documents. Photoshopped images of her in a Tuscany villa. Samantha watched from the back of the room, nauseous. But the horse had spoken louder than Leonard ever expected. Because while Leonard posed with a fake smile, Bishop was being examined by vets, and they found something shocking. A microchip embedded beneath his neck. Registered under Evelyn's full name. And updated last year. If she was in Italy, how did she update her horse's registry? That microchip was the first piece of irrefutable evidence. The second came from Janet. She wasn't dead. She had gone into hiding. And Samantha found her, through an old email chain buried in Evelyn's inbox. It was just a single phrase: "If anything happens, check the drawer under my cot." Samantha returned to the barn. She waited until Leonard left for his lawyer meeting, then snuck in with a crowbar. The drawer was rotting, almost stuck. But inside, wrapped in a plastic sheet, was a worn-out flash drive. Tomas decoded it that night. And what they found shattered everything. Video logs. Dozens of them. Footage from a hidden camera Evelyn had taped to the beams during her early days of captivity. She had documented everything. The nurse visits. Her deteriorating condition. Even moments when Leonard came in to check on her. In one video, he screamed at her, accused her of faking her symptoms. Called her dead weight. In another, he confessed. "I should have never let the boy come back. He was going to ruin me." That one line changed the game. Evelyn's son wasn't from Leonard, he was from her first marriage, before Leonard had her sign a prenup. That son, Daniel, had shown up 2 years ago after finding Evelyn's letters. Letters she'd hidden inside Bishop's saddlebag. Daniel had wanted to reunite. Had come to the estate one rainy night. And vanished. No police report. No trace. Until now. The footage showed Evelyn sobbing after Leonard returned from a stormy drive, blood on his cuff, whispering, "He won't be bothering you anymore." And Evelyn never saw Daniel again. It was murder. But this time, they had proof. Tomas contacted a federal agent he trusted. They arranged a raid. But Leonard, ever cunning, sensed the walls closing in. That night, he tried to burn the barn. Lit a match. Threw kerosene. But Bishop was already there. He kicked the door down with a rage no one thought possible. Samantha, who had returned to check on Evelyn, screamed and dragged the fragile woman out just in time. Flames devoured the barn. Leonard fled, or tried to. But Bishop chased him. He cornered Leonard against a fence line, hooves flaring, nostrils wild. The stallion didn't strike. Just stood there, eyes burning, until Samantha arrived, holding Evelyn, and behind her, sirens wailed. And then, the second twist. Daniel wasn't dead. He had survived. Leonard hadn't buried him, he'd sold him. Sold him, to a trafficking network that handled complications. But Daniel had escaped. And it was Bishop who led Samantha to the hidden letters Evelyn had written him, letters she never sent. One of them contained a contact. Tomas traced it. They found Daniel in a trauma shelter in Georgia, barely alive but breathing. And the first word Daniel whispered when he saw the horse in a photograph was "Mom." Daniel's hands trembled as he gripped the photo. It had been nearly 2 years since he'd last seen a familiar face, even longer since he'd dared to speak his mother's name. But the sight of Bishop, Evelyn's faithful stallion, unlocked something raw, something buried. Tears welled in his eyes as he whispered again, "Mom." Tomas and Samantha sat quietly beside him in the trauma shelter's rec room, letting the moment breathe. Daniel had been through hell, rescued from a covert holding facility that branded itself as a recovery center for troubled adults. But the scars on his wrists and the haunted look in his eyes told a different story. "Leonard, he sold me," Daniel said at last. "I came that night to bring Mom home. I thought maybe she was trapped. But he was waiting. He said she was better off forgotten." Samantha's jaw clenched. "He's not getting away with it." Back at the Preston estate, Leonard sat inside a temporary holding cell at the local sheriff's department, unconvicted, smug, untouched. His lawyers were on their way. He spun a tale about Samantha being unstable, Evelyn hallucinating, Bishop being just a horse acting up. "They're trying to destroy a man's life over a jealous ex in a barn fire," he declared to a reporter through the bars. "Evelyn has had mental health issues for years. I've done everything to support her." But the world had changed. The footage had gone viral. Millions had seen Evelyn's condition. The internet wasn't forgetting this time. A federal inquiry had been launched. Tomas had handed over everything, including Evelyn's flash drive, the microchip records, and the connection to the trafficking ring where Daniel had been found. And then came the hearing. The courtroom was packed. Evelyn was wheeled in by Samantha, her body weak, her voice still faint, but her mind sharper than anyone expected. Daniel, in a suit borrowed from the shelter, walked in beside her. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but sketches of the moment later flooded social media, Evelyn's fragile hand reaching for her sons as she faced the man who tried to erase them both. Leonard wore a navy suit and a cold stare. The prosecutor laid it bare: false imprisonment, abuse of a disabled spouse, obstruction of justice, arson, and conspiracy to commit human trafficking. The case was unprecedented. But then came the final blow. Janet had reappeared, and this time, she testified. Under oath, she told the court how Leonard had bribed her to sedate Evelyn, how he threatened her when she asked too many questions, and how the night Daniel came, Leonard returned home soaked, with a bloody cuff and a cold grin. "It was a murder," she said. "But he thought he'd sold him into something worse." Gasps rippled through the room. When Bishop was brought into the courthouse courtyard, by special permission, something extraordinary happened. As Evelyn sat near the window, Bishop neighed and stomped once. Her eyes lit up. She smiled. And for a brief moment, it was like time reversed. Her fingers twitched, and she lifted a trembling hand to the glass. "Bishop," she whispered. The judge recessed. The internet exploded. The symbol of the entire case wasn't just Evelyn. It was the horse. The animal that had refused to be silent. That had acted where humans failed. That had quite literally seen everything, and carried that truth until it broke the gates wide open. Leonard was denied bail. His fortune began to crumble. Sponsors withdrew. Board seats revoked. Friends disappeared. The more his legal team tried to frame Evelyn as unfit, the more footage leaked showing the precise opposite. Her journals, her recordings, and even medical experts confirmed her clarity. She had been imprisoned in full awareness, watching her world collapse through barred windows. But justice alone wasn't enough. Daniel wanted to know why. So one night, after weeks of silence, Samantha brought him something Evelyn had asked to be retrieved, a sealed box from her old art studio. Inside, among sketches and journals, was a letter. It was written the week Evelyn married Leonard. "Daniel, my beautiful boy. I'm sorry. I married Leonard to protect you. I thought he could shield us, give you opportunity. But I see now, he only wanted my silence, and my name. If anything happens, know this, you were always my light. And Bishop will never forget you. Follow the horse, and you'll find the truth. Mom, asterisk. Daniel folded the letter, his face hardening. That's when he asked the question no one saw coming. Do you think I could take custody of her? Samantha blinked. You mean your mom? He nodded. I want to take her away from all of this. Start fresh. She deserves peace. But it wasn't that simple. Leonard still owned the estate. Despite being jailed, his assets were tied up. Lawyers were circling, trying to shift blame, claim mental instability, and even, shockingly, argue for full-time care for Evelyn under his company's medical services. He still wanted control. Daniel knew there was only one way to free her, for good. He went back to the court. Filed a motion. And offered a deal. He'd give up pressing civil charges against Leonard for the trauma, the illegal transfer, and the abuse, if Leonard signed over everything. The estate. The medical power. Custodianship. The room held its breath. Leonard said nothing at first. But 2 days later, behind bars and desperate to salvage his dwindling power, he agreed. In front of a notary and his own lawyers, Leonard Preston signed away everything he had to the one person he once tried to sell. And as he looked at Daniel for the last time, his voice cracked. She was supposed to forget me. Daniel stared back, unwavering. She didn't. And neither did Bishop. 6 months later, the Preston estate no longer bore that name. The brass sign at the entrance now read, Evelyn Haven. Daniel had renamed it in honor of his mother, a sanctuary, not a prison. The barn had been rebuilt, not as a holding cell but as a therapeutic stable where rescued horses helped trauma victims heal. Children with disabilities came weekly to ride and learn, laughter echoing in a space once haunted by silence. Bishop, now older but proud as ever, became a legend. News crews had flocked to the story, the horse that saw everything. Documentaries followed. Activist groups quoted the case in campaigns. Lawmakers cited Evelyn's ordeal and proposed protections for vulnerable spouses. A movement was born, one that didn't just whisper about abuse behind closed doors but roared for justice out in the open. But healing takes time. Evelyn's condition, while stabilized, remained irreversible. The damage Leonard had caused wasn't just physical, it had eroded years of potential joy, connection, memory. Yet each morning, she awoke to sunlight streaming through real windows, not slatted vents. Each day, she was surrounded by people who knew her worth. Daniel sat by her bedside every evening. He read her favorite poetry. Sometimes old letters from her students, sometimes passages from journals she once kept. Evelyn couldn't always speak, but her eyes followed every word. She smiled at Daniel's jokes. She flinched at thunder. And she never, ever let go of the small silver bell Bishop wore around his neck now, a symbol of presence. Of memory. Of love that refused to die. And Leonard? He was sentenced to 30 years without parole. His crimes, once invisible beneath wealth and charm, had finally been called by their names: abuse, fraud, trafficking, obstruction, attempted arson. His empire collapsed. His reputation? Gone. The last image the public saw of him was in an orange jumpsuit, shackled, head lowered, not in shame, but in disbelief that the world had turned against him. Because he had underestimated 2 things. A son's love. And a horse's memory. At the official ribbon cutting of Evelyn Haven, Samantha stood beside Daniel, Tomas, and Evelyn herself. She gave a brief speech. Sometimes, she said, the loudest cry for help isn't made with words. It's made with silence. With trembling hands. With hooves scratching at dirt when no one else is looking. And sometimes, it takes the purest hearts to remind us what justice really means. She looked toward Bishop, who stood just beyond the crowd. The stallion let out a soft neigh, as if he understood every word. That night, Daniel wheeled Evelyn onto the porch of the main house as fireflies danced through the garden. He sat beside her, watching the last streaks of twilight fade. "I wish I came sooner," he said softly. Evelyn didn't respond, but after a long moment, her hand gently reached for his. "You came," she whispered. "That's enough." And it was. Because despite all the horror, all the loss, and all the pain, they had found each other again, not broken, but rebuilt. Not buried, but blooming. Their story wasn't just one of justice. It was one of redemption. Of light returning through cracks that evil tried to seal shut. And as the night settled, the sound of Bishop's hooves echoed softly in the paddock. Not frantic. Not desperate. Just calm. As if he, too, knew. The nightmare had ended. And healing had begun. There are stories like Evelyn's happening around us every day, stories unseen, silenced by fear, power, and isolation. Abuse doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes, it wears a smile. A pressed suit. A donation to charity. Sometimes, the victim is too frail to scream. But someone always sees. This story is a reminder, believe the quiet ones. Protect the vulnerable. And never ignore the signs, whether they come from a neighbor, a whisper, or even a horse. If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, please reach out. You're not alone. Recommended reading. 1. No Visible Bruises by Rachel Louise Snyder, a powerful deep dive into the hidden epidemic of domestic violence. 2. The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, on trauma, survival, and healing. If this story moved you, share it. Someone might need to hear it more than you know.